Just a moment, Councillor Baldock. Good evening. Welcome to the Extraordinary Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group meeting. The recording is going through Joanne Johnson's device due to technical difficulties. Before I start, can I please ask any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback? And can I please ask remote participants to keep their camera and microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally not use the camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. This meeting is being recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their SBC or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile and tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. We are joined by the following officers: Joanne Johnson, Head of Place; Planning Policy Manager, Natalie Earle; Project Manager for Policy, Stuart Watson; Principal Planning Officer for Policy, Anna Stoner; Principal Planning Officer for Policy, Onawale Kufariji; Planning Officer for Policy, Christopher Mansfield; Planning Officer for Policy, Emma Gibson; and Democratic Services, Joe Millard. For visitors and members who are unfamiliar with the building and procedures, the fire alarm is a continuous loud ringing. In the event that a fire drill is planned during the meeting, the chair will advise of this. The exit routes from the chamber are located on each side of the room, one directly to the fire escape, the other to the stairs opposite the lifts. Can I ask for any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Charles Gibson, who's substituted by Councillor Ben Martin, Councillor Kieran Golding, who's substituted by Councillor Angela Harrison, Councillor James Hunt, who has no substitute, and Councillor Julian Speed, who may be online later. I also note that Councillor Baldock is online. Can I assume, Councillor Baldock, that you'll be remaining online for the duration of the meeting?
That's entirely up to the gods of the internet and all.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock.
Thank you very much. Can I please ask for any declarations of interest?
Well, yes, I'll make a declaration. I'm chair of the Five Parishes group.
Okay, thank you. So for item 4, we have the local plan review, which is the whole plan viability assessment of 2024, and I will ask the officer to introduce the report, which I believe is Stuart Watson.
Thank you, Chair. So members of the Plan and Transportation Working Group were briefed on the whole plan viability assessment in July 2024. They included a detailed question and answer session with the consultant who produced the study. At the briefing, members noted the findings of the assessment, including the policy recommendations that were set out. With the Council's intention now to carry out a Regulation 18 consultation that will cover the vision, objectives and development management policies of the plan, it's appropriate to publish this evidence, as amongst other matters, the evidence sets out the achievability of affordable housing contributions for the borough, and so it provides the key evidence for the affordable housing policy that is part of the intended Regulation 18 consultation. In very brief summary, the assessment determines that the viability evidence is there across the borough that the council can seek 30% affordable housing on greenfield sites, and that to help the delivery of brownfield sites, a 10% affordable housing contribution should be sought. As part of the viability testing, a series of site topologies were developed to assess the draft local plan policy requirements, of which affordable housing was one of those. Those typologies range from brownfield sites in urban areas to greenfield sites outside of built-up area confines. The assessment of those typologies will then also go on to inform the likely achievability of sites that will come forward in future plan drafting. The study also considered strategic sites that were made available at that time. It should be noted that those sites were tested at a very high level to inform the viability element of future plan drafting and not reflective of any live planning applications. The Council's policy direction will inevitably evolve through the drafting of the plan and consultation of those drafts and development of the evidence base and through changes in national policy. As a result, there will be a need to update this viability assessment as we move towards the Regulation 19 consultation that's intended for summer of next year. Members of the working group are asked to note the viability assessment before them and the specific affordable housing policy implications. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I please ask any members if they have any questions? Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to say, please, if we're going to have documents of this length, I need a paper copy. Can we please have them further ahead than 4 days before the meeting? I've read it all, but I haven't been able to spend the time I would like digesting it. There's an awful lot of work gone into these documents, and I would like to have given it the credit that I believed it deserved. Regarding this in particular, I like the green, amber and red of the charts, because that makes it really, really clear. And the fact that, yes, it shows Greenfield are a lot more viable than Brownfield, sadly. But yeah, I'm a visual learner, so I found it really useful. And a lot of things come together with this report. Having listened to Highstead, all the talk about viability makes more sense when you have got the Bible, as it were, before you. Thank you.
Councillor Bonney.
Okay, I've got a few points. The first is, how does this sit, the affordable housing, alongside the NPPF's recommendations that at least 50% of housing to be affordable? Can we say, if you could just give us an update on that? And then I'll come back.
Okay, if you want to take that.
Yes, certainly. I think the Council's referring to the Greenbelt changes in terms of the government is trying to encourage the release of Greenbelt land, of which there's none within Swale Borough. As part of that policy approach, they are setting out they were seeking 50% affordable housing on Greenbelt land. But as I said, we don't have any of that within this borough, so it's not relevant.
Ooh, okay, that's great, thank you. It's all right, I get asked by lots of people, so I think it's good for everyone to understand that. There's a couple of things which concern me, not least having read the report. There's a few errors with tables that I don't think column headings are missing, and there's a couple of sentences that don't actually make sense in there. But before I dive too deeply into that, obviously we're going in for a Reg 18 now. When it comes to a Reg 19, is this evidence likely to be updated?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it will have a partial update to it. So the evidence was produced in detail in the spring of 2024. So by the time we move to Reg 19, that'll be 2 years later. Since then, there's been a new NPPF released. For example, it removes a 25% requirement of all affordable housing to be first home. So that's been removed. So we need to test the viability on that. And we can also review the cost assumptions and the sale assumptions of properties. And we can also review the responses we get to the Reg 18 consultation as well to see if there's any value in those responses in terms of amending the evidence base. So yeah, the intention is to do an update before the Reg 19.
Okay, all right. So that helps a bit, I think, because I think there was some concern when I read it that some of the evidence is now quite old that they refer to in there. One of the things that does concern me is obviously with strategic sites generally is that they do carry an awful lot of potential issues in terms of abnormal costs. So this would be whether it's roads, whether it's water, whatever it is, larger sites will by definition have to carry abnormal costs. And I just think that when that calculation is made and looked at, that we need to have that in mind. So I would like it noted for the future that the council really needs to bear down on this and And I think that is possibly the weakness when it came to Highstead Park, is that really wasn't screwed down at the outset with a proper set of costings. And I think that's the other thing, is around costs and having a proper set of costs to understand these. Obviously, we'll get latest sales data and that's easier to analyse. But also when I was looking at the areas, and they're quite generic, and I understand that, yes, you know, in terms of liquidity of the market, you may not have loads of sales data for every village and every town. But there are some quite stark differences in the areas that have been lumped in together. And I think that needs to be better clarified going forwards in the next version. The other issue, let me just check, was, hold on, I'll just bring up my notes. The other one is around, on strategic sites, is that what is actually delivered and in what time frame, because I think when you end up with a strategic site, everyone can get very, you know, excited that the big numbers will deliver. But if those big sites also carry abnormal costs in order to get them out the ground, they also then are likely to incur significant delays in coming forward. And there's a whole host of risks attached to that, which can translate through into the delivery of affordable homes and other benefits that we would expect to come along with a strategic site. And that could put us in a difficult position if that doesn't come forward in a timely fashion. So at that, I will leave it at that, but I'd like those points noted and taken forwards. Thank you.
Are those okay to note? Okay. Councillor Gold.
Thank you. You mentioned that the strategic sites have got sort of very high level assessments of them. I mean, it seems that is one of the main things in getting that viability is that existing use value, because, you know, certainly one of the ones of the strategic sites in my area, I can see why it's got a more viable, because its existing use value must be very low. It's sort of rough grazing and, you know, on a fairly remote place. So it's not there's not much economic activity happening on a site like that. But actually, that's probably not one of the sort of least significant constraints for that. So, but it suddenly comes out as really sort of quite viable. It's not necessarily sustainable or deliverable, and it seems to be this is just on the viability in those pure economic terms is my sort of first question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important to make the difference in the discourse between a live plan application and plan drafting. So a live plan application, they're having to provide detailed viability. They've done a lot of detailed assessments to determine what can be delivered on the site. For plan draft, it's that first stage of identifying sites, identifying those that are most likely to be achievable, so financially deliverable. So it's useful within the whole plan viability assessment to have a specific set of criteria within it just for strategic sites. So, for example, as previously sort of mentioned by Councillor Bonney, there's a much higher need for infrastructure on strategic sites, both built and natural. So the whole plan viability assessment makes a much lower allowance for the developable area. So, for example, a major site typology would have 80% of the site could be developable, but a strategic site goes down to 60%. It also makes greater acknowledgements of higher contributions from developers as well compared to a major site. So it kind of has all those high-level strategic matters in place there. But as I say, it's to inform that first stage of site selection, so we won't at that point have had the detailed evidence. for example, we were then to select a strategic site for testing through plan drafting. We would then start engaging more detail with the site promoters. We'd be able to develop the policies for it and test it through the local plan consultation process. At that point, we'll get more and more evidence as the plan drafting progresses, at which point we'll get more to that detail of how a strategic site can be delivered and what the viability is. So I think it's just important to make the difference between a live plan application, which has a lot of information, a lot of detail, because they're looking to deliver the site, to the plan approach where we're at the sort of first stage of selecting strategic sites, if that makes sense.
So, just to come back, so we're not really looking at deliverability at this point. Is that right, or is that, or is it just focusing on purely the viability, or do we get to those other things later?
It is looking at deliverability of strategic sites, but at a much higher level, because they're much more complex than a major site. So there's much more issues that need to be identified on as they move forward towards becoming allocated and then getting planning consent. So it is very much a high-level strategic assessment of the achievability of a site. It's not going to be as detailed because we won't have that information at such an early stage, that the level of detail that you'll then get through a live planning application, if that makes sense.
So the other question at this stage, which I'm surprised Councillor Bonney didn't raise, but is about the health aspects of it. I mean, there's a table 8.4 is a good schedule of all the developer contributions, which is a sort of a shopping list of what they would like. Certainly, looking at a couple of planning applications, bigger planning applications recently, Health have come up with pretty much the same sort of shopping list, for larger applications. Is that something that we would see and put in at this point from a viability point of view? Because they're going to be asking for those things, one would hope.
Yeah, so since the evidence was produced, I believe that there's been a consultation on more detail in terms of the contributions required by the NHS for health matters. So that would be one of the things that we would need to update on the viability work when we go to the Reg 19. So that's in the public domain now, but it's been since the base of this evidence was produced.
Councillor Baldock, I am going to bring you in, but could I please ask you to keep it brief due to the amount of people in the room tonight and how long we might go on for?
I might have the same status as every other member of this working group. You haven't told them to keep it brief. We went all through this over a year ago, so I'm not sure quite what we can hope to achieve by going through it again. It's effectively been agreed. I do agree that this is an awful lot of stuff to read in a very short period of time. Okay, I've read the whole plan viability assessment extent before, but there are a lot of other documents for this meeting tonight that and in total, they did require significantly more time than I think we were allowed. I'm a bit concerned about the tables on the what can be delivered. I did add them, but then I think they're at 10 point something. What can be delivered on some of the strategic sites with the financing? We are now 18 months further down the line. Are these tables still valid? I think like 10.11, at the level of which policy requirements become, I think, non-viable. These are really crucial issues, and I was wondering if they changed much in the 18 months, if we're expecting to have to redo those tables.
If you want to take that.
So the approach to setting the viability of them won't have changed at this stage. However, there will be some fluctuations in the financial valuations, as just previously mentioned, the NHS through their seeking much higher contributions. However, overall, it's still reasonable to say the conclusions particularly are still valid in terms of directing us towards the approach of selection of sites. As I mentioned previously, we will need to do an update before the Reg 19 to reconfirm that. As part of plan drafting, once the sites are selected, we will need to informally engage with the site promoters to reconfirm their availability and that they can be delivered. So all these kind of things will need to be finalised as we move towards Reg 90. But at this stage, this still provides a robust starting point for site selection.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Baldock?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. It's just one or two things. First of all, I haven't received a complete copy. Whether one was sent to me or not, I don't know, but it certainly hasn't arrived. But I did look, obviously, online, which was quite difficult with 1,000 pages. But I did go through it. But I haven't got, I won't delay you at all. On 3.4, people will know, well, I'm talking now as a, although I was pretty small, as an ex-developer. I did build quite a few properties, or have, with trades, got them constructed. So I'm very concerned that with Swale that the developer contribution, bear in mind that if it's a greenfield site, there's a huge enhancement in the value of the land. So it's up to the developer really, or the landowner, to make a much bigger contribution to the community. And I don't think on 3.4 it says less than 3,500. I think that's dreadful, frankly. This is for a contribution for social housing, I think, but not enough, frankly, because as you appreciate, from a few greenfield site goes from a few thousand an acre up to, I don't know, it can be 500,000 an acre or even more. So there's a huge amount of money there, and I think it's up to developers will still develop if they're going to make a profit. And I don't mind people making a profit. That's how business works. But I think it's very excessive, the difference in the enhanced value of land, because obviously there's a shortage. So I think that really needs to be squeezed a bit. They need to be squeezed. They'll get their hankies out and tell you, oh, it's not viable and all this business. But sorry, but I know, anyway, that's the thing. So that's really the main thing that I would have a beef about, is generally contributions from greenfield sites. Brownfield sites, of course, cost a lot more to develop because you've got to get rid of whatever the previous development was and a lot of groundworks. But it's about a third of the cost of any site is groundworks. So the greenfield site, it isn't very much at all. As you say, putting roads in, I've put roads in. It can be done. And if you've got enough properties on that, then each property allows a certain amount of money, or you do for each property. You make sure you end up with a surplus. Thank you.
Just on the agenda, Democratic Services did email and apologise due to the delay. Initially, there was a problem with the printer not working, and then it wasn't really possible to post an agenda of the size. Do you need the other part of your questions answering?
I'm not complaining at all.
Just in case you hadn't noticed it. And do you need the next part answering? If you want to take that.
So obviously I understand members' concerns that we should be seeking higher affordable housing contributions. We should be seeking more financial contributions. However, I do have to reiterate that this document has been produced by industry specialists following national policy and guidance. It tests, the estimated land values, existing land values, costs to build, cost that what they can get from sale values and expected Section 106 contributions at the time of putting the study together. As part of refining that process, the consultants did hold a workshop with industry specialists to try and refine their expectations from it. And as I say, they followed the guidance set out nationally, and unfortunately, these are the conclusions they've come out with for the viability for land around the Swell Borough area.
Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, can I come in quickly on something that might amuse people, actually, that Dead Man's Island has got health and disability, and education is the worst thing for education and employment, but that's Dead Man's Island, so I think someone perhaps didn't look at the site, as that was where, because Sheerness used to be a port for, well, it was the national port for ships in the sailing ship days that had, infectious disease like yellow fever and things like that. So, of course, and all the people were buried at Dead Man's Island, so there's nobody lives there. Anyway, sorry, I just thought that was amusing. Thank you.
Councillor Baldock, sorry about that. Do you want to come back in and ask that?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted a bit of clarification on where this has to go, and if it has already been ratified by a committee when we discussed it last time, because we discussed it at length. And also, this document does show maybe we need to be considering our affordable housing levels in light of what else we want to achieve. Being frank, most of our affordable housing seems to be affordable to Londoners rather than local people. Do we want maybe a lower affordable housing target, say 25%, if it means we achieve better quality and better standards on our other policies? And I'm wondering if that's a discussion we really ought to have had.
Yeah, if I can just come in terms of the affordable housing target that we have as a local authority, that's determined by what's known as our strategic housing market assessment. So it looks at the type of housing we need within the borough, and it concludes within there that we should be seeking 27.7% to be exact affordable housing across the borough. So bearing in mind Brownfield can't do as much as Greenfield, the 30% on Greenfield and 10% on Brownfield should enable us to get to that percentage. So we've already have an evidence base that's saying that we should be seeking these figures that we're discussing here. So if members were to take an approach to go for a lower target, that would be in contrary to the evidence that we've got already published on our website.
It seems like we don't have any choice in what we do untold, really, doesn't it?
In regards to your first part, this report is for noting. Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I kind of wasn't going to speak, but that's the point you just made in a way. This is kind of a retrospective report. I did ask the question earlier of the officers during the pop-in session during the afternoon. So I'm not going to ask it again, but I was very pleased to hear Stuart talking about the fact that the evidence in here will be reviewed for the Reg 19. So when we actually go to publish, and because having a whole plan viability report, when we don't know what the strategic sites are, for example, we might have an idea, we might think we know, but we don't, because we don't have any sites. So we can't have a valid strategic site review, because I'll include those figures in here because we don't know what they are. We will know by the time we go out to a Reg 19 consultation, and all of these numbers will get. And I hope when we are putting that together, and before we, while we're discussing that Reg 19 consultation document with all of the updated valid evidence, questions like the affordability thing, whether it's viable to have 25% or 30% or 35% affordability for affordable housing, for example. They're things that we can discuss again at that point, I would hope, because all of this will be up for review. So I'm happy to note the report, given that it is a retrospective report of the situation over a year ago, It's good that it's out there in the public domain, and there's attention brought to it, so developers and others will get to see where our baselines are, because these are our baselines in here that will get developed over the next 12 or a few months before the Reg 19 goes out. So that was just a comment, not a question. Thank you.
Councillor Harrison, did I see you indicating to speak earlier? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. Firstly, yes, 'tis for noting, so I would be quite happy to move the recommendation that we know if somebody's going to second it. And the second one was a question. I do read a lot of things. I can't always remember where they're from. Did I read somewhere that the government were looking to rescind the legislation relating to affordable housing and bring us back to where we were, which was social housing, which is actually what the need is in Swale, let alone anywhere else in the country. The need is not for affordable housing because it isn't actually affordable to the vast majority of local people. I vaguely remember seeing it somewhere, but I could have been dreaming. You don't know about these things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly I'm more than happy to note this, and just for way of example, certainly I agree with Councillor Harrison, social housing, yes, over affordable. We all know that with the lack of increases in the local housing allowance rates, that affordable rents are not covered by housing benefit in the area at the minute. And just as by way of an example, table 12.1, it shows what the difference in house prices are over a year. Those averages in Faversham for detached properties in the south were £512,000 at the time when this report was written. They're now selling on average for £643,000. That's the last 11 new build properties of similar sort of sizes to go. And one of those was at a very hefty discount compared to the others, which drags the average down. So I'm sure when we get to Reg 19, those figures are going to inflate quite considerably. But more than happy to second the move to the vote.
In which case, I'd say we should head to the vote. All those in favour?
Oh, can I speak?
My apologies, Chair. Was I imagining it, Stuart, or is there something in the mist that the government are looking at this?
I'm not aware of anything of that magnitude, but what they did do in the last National Planning Policy Framework update was remove the requirement for 25% of affordable homes to be first homes. So what first homes was a reduction in market value. So it wasn't like an affordable house or social rented house. It was effectively a market house, but at a reduced price to around about 80%, but it varied by local authority. And it was only available to first-time buyers. So to sort of provide some context to that, for example, if you're asking for 30% of the houses to be affordable, 25% of that 30% would go to first homes. So that would have used to eat away at the affordable housing and the social rented housing. So by removing that, it means now you'll get a higher percentage of the affordable and social housing, if that makes sense.
I've had people indicate it's been proposed and second. I am going to go to the vote. This is to note the report. Can I ask for those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Next up, we have the local plan evidence base net zero policy development, which is item 5, which I believe will be delivered by Anna.
Thank you, Chair, and everyone. This report is asking members to note the findings of a study that the planning policy team commissioned on the development of net zero policy for Swale Borough Council. The study follows on from the Council's net zero ambitions as established in the Climate and Ecological Emergency Declaration and Action Plan, and the need for new development in the borough to be carbon neutral. The consultants commissioned are working at the forefront of climate policy for local authorities. A growing number of the local authorities for whom they have made policy recommendations now have adopted local plans with ambitious climate policies, using the approaches and more accurate metrics advocated in this study. The recommendations in the study have been tested by our viability consultants. Members have also been involved in the policy choices, specifically at a workshop in September last year, where they gave a steer towards the most ambitious best practice option as the path that the local plan should follow. The policy recommendations set out in this evidence-based study have fed directly into policies C1 to C5 in the draft Regulation 18 document, item 6 of this agenda. Whilst ambitious, these policies are considered to be robust and achievable and will enable new buildings in Swale to be truly net zero. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Can I please ask if any members have questions? Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for that, Anne. I do have some concern about this because we've included it said five new innovative policies in our draft, in our Reg 18 consultation document, none of which have been agreed by members, and it's members that set policy, not officers here. I know there was a workshop, and I know what the members in an informal workshop gave an informal steer to officers to draft up some policies. They've come back with 5, included them in the list in the next item, and included them in the draft regulation. These aren't policies of the council because they've not, to my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, I don't believe these policies have been ratified by members such that they should appear in a list of council policies. Now, if I'm wrong, that's fine. I'm more than happy to be told I'm wrong. But we can't go forming policy just on a workshop where some members have turned up. We're all invited. I accept that. But those members there, show of hands, option C, and suddenly it becomes de facto council policy, and that's not. It may be the best policy. I'm not arguing about whether it's the right one or the wrong one. I just think I'm trying to understand the process by which we draft and create 5 new innovative climate change policies and include them in a Reg 18 consultation when they've not been ratified by members up until this point. That's my question, I guess.
Can I ask Joanne to come in and answer that?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to. Yes, you're correct. They've not been ratified. So officers have used the evidence base to develop the draft innovative policies. Tonight is the start of the process of ratification. So it's up to members tonight to say that they are happy for those policies to go out to consultation. If members are happy for that to happen, then we will look at the responses, and when we come to the Reg 19 stage, members will have another chance to shape those policies. They won't be ratified until the local plan is adopted, which I think is scheduled for the very start of 2027. But you also have within your gift tonight to shape those policies, to say that you don't recommend they go forward, that you recommend they go forward looking slightly different. So this is the very start of that ratification process. They have been developed by officers, yes, on the basis of the evidence, but this is the start of their quite lengthy journey before they will be adopted as council policy, if indeed they are.
Does that answer your question?
Well, it answered the question that we've put in here and listed as policies without the word draft on them. Things we're asking the public to comment on when, as members, we've not had a chance to read a report about these policies and to decide whether they're the right policies for the council or not. And I suppose that's my point. So at the moment, I'm kind of uncomfortable about having them included in the draft 18 because they're not things the council has. I mean, it would be a decision for P&R at the end of the day and then full council. I get that. But it would have been nice to see in a report. Chair. Sorry?
It is a live document, and that, I believe, can be edited in consultation with the chair if members agree that when we get to that stage.
We could certainly agree that. So I think the second recommendation in the report as it stands is around very minor changes, so grammar and typos and clarifications. But members could choose to expand that to slightly more significant changes if they wished. So these all should be seen as draft policies. That is, if you like, the point of the Regulation 18 consultation. It may be that we haven't made that clear enough in the draft, and we can certainly make sure we do that when we're communicating the purpose of the Reg 18 consultation. We can be much clearer on that if that would help.
Yeah, I mean,
does that address your concerns?
It kind of addresses it. I mean, we could go around in circles, but we've got a lot of policies here that members haven't agreed, and we're portraying them as policies of the council because it says that.
Well, I'm
on
sure
the documents, but
everyone will take that under advisement.
Thank you, Chair.
And
Thank
note
you.
that for future writing. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I actually welcome having these sort of policies put forward in draft, ready for consultation. One area where I do have some concern is around the policy labelled Policy C5 around district heat networks. Now, I understand that we have not got a choice in that government is pushing through with legislation which will force connection to district heat networks where they're available. My concern is that they are not the low carbon solutions that they purport to be, and they actually increase costs to residents. So, for example, I am aware of a district heat network that is in development in another district within Kent, and where the viability of connection worked out, I think that it was around £900 per annum to heat a 2-bedroom flat from the heat network. That's excluding your other items such as cooking, electricity, etc. It's around about twice what their average bill would be for a gas condensing boiler at the moment. So that is the concern element. However, as I say, I understand that we have to look at it. I do think that we may perhaps want to look at whether we word it. I believe that the legislation is going to require that it is connection to the district heat network where you are unable to prove that you can provide low carbon heating at a lower cost. And I think that's what we need to push for, because we need to protect our future residents from essentially monopolised heat networks, which is what we will get, and ensure that they're able to afford to heat their homes. Let's not put the damp and mould problem back front and centre in the future by making a mistake now.
Do you need anything answered on that, or would you like to make any recommendation there, or just leave that as it is?
I think it will probably come out in the consultation responses with any luck, but if Anna has any opinion on that as well, I'm more than happy to hear it.
Thank you. I didn't quite catch everything you said, but I think it's about heat networks being more expensive than, yeah. So, I mean, I can, they're only proposed in this policy where they're the best kind of choice for carbon. So they're kind of already sort of not at the top of the list. But I can probably also, I can talk to the consultants who wrote this study about kind of including something about viability potentially, and about how costs need to come down. Because I think one of the kind of main points of these policies is that it's about reducing bills for customers. So yeah, that's an important objective. So I can go back and have a think about that and talk to the consultants and maybe change some of the wording. Yeah, thank you.
I'm very happy with that, and rather than viability, I'd call it affordability for end user, or end user affordability.
Councillor Gould.
Yeah, I'm also very pleased to see this report and the update of what we've got here, and the really the emphasis on actually, if you don't ask, you don't get, seems to be the summary of this lot. And I think we should ask, and I'm very pleased to see these policies filtering through into the draft. There's absolutely what we should be doing. This slightly relates back to the viability report mentioned some different things. Presumably that's another thing, that the viability report will be updated to reflect these policies, assuming they get through the regulation 18 and appear in the 19. Is that correct?
Can I?
Go ahead.
So the consultants bioregional discussed these policy proposals with viability consultants. That was before the viability study was the draft, the workshop in the summer, yeah? Last summer?
Yeah, I thought it was just after.
right. Yeah. So I think that was in July 2024. Yeah. Okay. So they were working on it on the summer, over the summer of 2024 into the autumn of 2024. Yes, they have. So the viability study was cognizant of all these these policy approaches, and I think they will be looking at it again in the update. Is that right, Stuart?
Yes, if you actually look at the viability assessment, it looks at the development management policies that were in the Reg 19 from 2021. So that was the starting point for building the viability assessment. So as part of doing the update now, we've restructured the DM policies. We've got thematic topic areas. There's been policy criteria tweaks since the Reg 19, which we're going to come on to in a bit more detail. But also, because these are new policies, these climate change ones, they will then need to be tested through that viability update as we move to Reg 19.
But that hasn't featured in the report that we discussed a moment ago. Is that?
But the detail of the policy wording, they haven't seen that, but the principles were established.
Councillor MacDonald.
If I can follow along from there, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've been doing some work with Glasgow University to look at deep boring, which actually gives you free heat in the end. And we're not going to cool the Earth's surface down in millennia. So I'm very keen on that, and I would have thought that it could be economic if there's enough properties that are actually connected to it. I was looking originally for the swimming pool. Sadly, our Earth's crust here is much thicker than it is in places like Iceland, where they can just pump the hot water straight away. So, I like these sort of ideas. Because obviously free heat is what we would all like. But anyway, that was the one thing. The other thing is, I think, and this is a comment, I think Swale have done incredibly well with regard to a natural way of getting rid of CO2, not this business of capturing CO and paying millions of pounds to companies. I really think this is not on. And Swale, of course, have planted lots of trees, which is a natural way of doing it. And I think if we can go in that direction and plant more, particularly broadleaf trees in areas that it is a possibility. Obviously, the carbon is retained by the tree, and it emits the oxygen which we all breathe. So I think trees are, really quite good, because they do it for nothing once they're there. Thank you.
Do you need anything answered on that?
No.
Okay. Councillor Harrison.
I actually concur with Councillor Whiting on this. I think members should have had a good chin wag on these draft policies before they go out to consultation. And not, a workshop doesn't do it for me. My question was on page 300, and we know developers are going to argue left, right and centre, and because they can afford somebody who's on 10 grand a day and we can't, they usually win. A written ministerial statement from 2023, well, that was a previous government. Has there been any indication from the current government that they stand by this particular statement? And let's be fair, it was probably written by a civil servant. If the minister would have signed it, doubt that he even remembers what it was. And certainly, would the new minister know anything about it? So I'd have a problem on that. But if it stood at the moment, then I think that we would have a problem. It's all very well that some planning inspectors, we know there is no consistency there. some planning inspectors will say, well, no, the council's policy is clear, and other inspectors will say, well, you know, you're trying to stiff the developers. I don't mean they'd use the language I do, because they tart it up, don't they? So a couple of points there that I'm not really that sure that a WMS matches in with what you're putting down there. And as I say, I think there should be a robust discussion amongst members, not just those people who were free on the night, on draft policies that are going to affect this borough for, you know, some time to come. And the issue of heat, you know, depend who you talk to, depends. Some people it's the best thing since sliced bread, some of this heat stuff, and some of them wouldn't touch it with a barge pole because of the cost to the people that are going to end up in the properties. Thanks, Chair.
If you want to go ahead on that one.
Thank you. So, yes, the written ministerial statement still stands with this government. They haven't made any suggestion that they're going to withdraw it, sadly. And the issues are still going through. Well, there've been, over the summer, there've been some legal judgments around this, and I don't think the government made any particular comment on that to withdraw that statement. Oh, sorry. In terms of risks, I mean, that was quite a feature of the workshop. Obviously, not everyone could come to that. And it examined the risks for planning and the risks for carbon. And there were 3 options set out through the workshop. One with lower risk and the one that was chosen in the end was lower risk for climate, but higher risk for planning. So there is a risk that these policies won't get through local plan hearings. That's definitely a risk. But the policies comprise, you know, several elements, and some of them will definitely comply with government guidance and the written ministerial statement, where others are more sort of pushing the boundaries. But I think the conclusion of the workshop was that we needed to be ambitious at this point, because it's much more difficult to work uphill at a later stage than to pull back at a later stage. So we need to be ambitious from the get-go and then see how far we get. I can't guarantee that these policies will be adopted as they've been written, but that's to fulfill our climate objectives, we needed to be bold, and we'll see how we get on, but there is a risk, yeah.
Councillor Harrison?
Yes, there is a risk, and who's taking it? The taxpayer, bottom line. So, I mean, I'll leave it for now, but there does need to be a proper discussion. I'm not ultimately signing my name to something at Policy and Resources that we haven't had a good discussion on at this council. And our residents would expect, if we're putting stuff out for consultation, our residents would expect that we have all discussed it fully. Not, oh, well, the officers have come up with this, so there was a bit of a workshop for those people who were free on the night. What do you think? Well, what do you think? Well, I don't know, I wasn't there. So, as I say, I do think it needs a proper discussion by members, but, you know, that's for another day. But I'm not signing my name away at Policy and Resources for something we haven't discussed properly. Thanks.
Councillor Baldock, can I ask if that's a legacy hand?
It certainly is, and I've had it up for quite a while. You're supposed to take people in rotation in a hybrid meeting, not leave people to the end just because we're online.
I don't believe I have to take you at all, Councillor Baldock.
No, you can show bias if you wish, but my hand has been.
I am going to take you. I'm just saying I don't believe I have to select you to speak. Go ahead.
I didn't say you did have to select me. I just said that would be showing bias. You're supposed to take people in circle, though, as a fair chairman. Now, I tend to agree strongly with what Councillors Harrison and Whiting said. These are documents on policies that we discussed. I don't know, there's mention of 2 recommendations earlier, but on my paper copy there's one, and it's members are asked to note the findings of a net zero policy development evidence work. And 2.18, once noted by this committee, the 3 parts of this study and the executive summary, along with a note on recent legal and planning decisions mentioned above, will be uploaded to the evidence-based pages of a local plan website. So it's not even something that's going to go forward for ratification. According to this document, once we note it, it goes up as evidence. So I think that's quite quite concerning. I don't know if there's a different agenda has been put online with 2 recommendations, but certainly the paper has only one, and that's to note it. And that doesn't leave us the opportunity to say, well, actually, let's look at these policies. Is this what's going to go as part of our evidence base? Is this something we are happy with as councillors? I don't see the hand of members on this at this point.
I'm going to ask Joanne to come in there.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. So what we are doing with this report is noting the evidence base. The final report for the evening is the Reg 18 consultation launch, and there we look at the policies. I think we're going to be looking at them sort of a few at a time, but that is the opportunity to comment on those policies, to decide if you think they're ready for consultation, to make changes as you see fit, to make recommendations. So this is to note the evidence base. Then we move on to looking at the Reg 18 consultation document as a whole, and that is where the new policies feature that are stemming from this evidence base. Thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Baldock?
Well, it's a bit like putting the cart before the horse, but okay. I mean, if we, well, 2.18, it does say that it will be uploaded to the evidence base. It doesn't say as a result of this decision. It doesn't say as part of a further decision, which is the next item. I'm just not comfortable with the way this is being done, but okay.
Do you want to say that, Natalie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so all our evidence, as was agreed a couple of years ago with yourselves, gets uploaded onto the evidence-based part of our website once noted by yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, I kind of, I agree with paragraphs 216, which is C1 to 5. However, on C5, what concerns me is renewable energy development and infrastructure. Is we could end up with a situation where we have a housing development put forwards and right next to it a solar farm on Grade 1 agricultural land. And it seems really defeatist in that really what we want is we don't want it on the farmland and some of the best in the country. What we want it on is on the roofs of the houses they're building and commercial buildings, etc. So I think it is about how it's presented, but also how that's then followed through. And I can pick that up in, on the next agenda item. But I do raise a bit of concern there about sort of the generic wording. It's how it's translated and followed through so that it doesn't become self-defeating, as it were. It's all right being chasing net zero, but if at the same time then actually harming the very thing, the environment that you actually wish to protect. So.
Do you need anything on that now, or are you going to wait until the next item on it? Okay. Councillor Whiting.
I was going to kind of make a proposal, thank you, Chair, that, I'm quite happy to note the report. Like others, I'm not necessarily happy that it's all going to go straight up on the evidence base and appear like it's council policy, if that's what I've just understood would happen. It's normal that when we note these things, they go into the evidence base. Somebody just said that.
It goes on as part of our evidence base. That's not part of council policy.
No, but they're written. They go up as they're referred to as council policies, and
No,
they're not.
no.
Good. But we'll discuss it at the next one. I was a little bit concerned, Chair, but I don't normally hear officers give sort of a political opinion, but I thought I heard Anna suggest that she was disappointed.
Yes.
You said you were disappointed the government hadn't done something, and we don't normally hear that from officers. And I just I'm
disappointed that there isn't more clarity in this area, because there's an awful lot of confusion and a lot of time wasting going on, because there's just
I'm grateful for that, because it sounded like you were disappointed that the minister hadn't changed his mind, and that was.
I'm disappointed
that's what I heard,
that there's no lack of clarity.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councillor Gould.
I think almost picking up on that is my understanding. The point of this evidence is that actually legislation is probably what we need to pay attention to, rather than an unclear ministerial statement. And the legislation is about looking for the low carbon solutions in order to mitigate the climate change, and that's written into the Climate Change Act and the policy framework, and in so many other of the acts that this report actually references, and that the ministerial statement creates vagueness. And in the absence of that clarity, we should be actually going for the things that will actually deliver what has been legislated for. And that's, to me, is what the gist of this report is that actually there is legislation that says this is what you should be doing, and then the report expands how you will actually do it, rather than following some guidance which actually doesn't deliver the overarching legislative aim of the climate change reduction. And I think in terms of the process, we have to start somewhere. There's no policy that's come up that has been debated before it's appeared in a policy document, which almost seems to be what is being asked for here, that we debate a policy before we debate a policy. And I think that that the evidence was there before. It was debated at a PTPWG meeting, and I think part of the process of having those working groups is to work up policy, and that. So I think there has been some debate about this, which has been amended and updated, and is now appearing as a policy for us to discuss. So I'm very comfortable with this process, and I think with the process that it points out about the force of the legislation is actually what we should actually hold people account to. We've said this is how we're going to do it if you really mean it.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. My point that sort of sits between the different parts. If I understood the viability evidence right, it's quite tight. Now, I have no problem sticking with the legislation regarding net zero, but it can't. If we can go beyond what the legislation says and be ahead of other people, that's great, but it can't be at the cost of affordable housing. Will we have to choose, or the planning officers have to choose when applications come up? What do we do? I mean, I hope Councillor Martin's right that the value of properties has soared, so there's less tightness about the viability, but we can't go hell for leather on one item and then lose something else. So I don't think there's necessarily a question to be answered, it's just a statement. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, and it's just to come back on some of what's already been said. I think Councillor Gould has hit the nail on the head in terms of, this is around, you can't debate a policy position if you haven't got a document in front of you to debate. We've spent 6 years begging to have some sort of policy that gives us something to fight for at planning committee. whether that be at a cabinet meeting, whether that be at the local plan panel, whether that be here or policy resources or the environment committee or anywhere else, we have been begging for this for 6 years. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater on that. In terms of renewables being on the rooftops, yeah, of course we all want that. But any policy won't sit in isolation. It will work with the building regs. You now pretty much cannot build without putting solar on the rooftops and meet the new building reg requirements, unless you want to have walls that are about 3 times the thickness that you really want. So that helps us out to an extent as well. I think there's a lot of good work gone in. It is far easier to backtrack if we need to for viability reasons or any other reasons than it is to try and reach a little bit further. So ambition at this stage is a good thing. And in terms of what happens down the road with affordable housing or climate change or contributions for NHS, etc., yeah, there's always going to be a balance and a compromise that has to be struck. We have to do that on every decision we make here. And that's a decision for a little bit further down the road. Right now, let's be ambitious, let's be bold, try and get the absolute best that we can get. And if we have to scale back a little bit, we have to scale back a little bit. And I'll use the example, let's face it, 4 or 5 years ago, I came in and said, I want 150 new affordable flats and I want the council to pay for them. And now we're probably going to get 50. But it's better than 0. So the same applies here. I think the officers should be commended for the work that's been done. It's perfectly valid to go into the evidence base. Everything else that we've looked at here or at the local plan panel has ended up in the evidence base. So let's note the report and be bold and ambitious and move forward.
Anyway, I'm happy to propose the recommendations to note. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kavanagh. All those in favour? I make that unanimous. I'm now, before we go on to the next item, going to call for a 10-minute comfort break.
I didn't vote on that, so it's not unanimous.
You're online, Councillor
It's
Baldock.
a working group.
It's a hybrid meeting.
It's a hybrid working group. It's a working group.
Okay.
It's not a council meeting as such. It is a working group.
So I can vote.
Joe Millard.
Thank you, Chair. The legislation is still not been confirmed. There are some recent changes around remote voting being sort of allowed in official meetings. You're quite right, it is a working group, but the process that we've always followed as this council for this working group is that we don't vote online. It hasn't been challenged anywhere else in the country, but other authorities also follow this same route as well. Thank you.
Sorry, that's not true. We have taken votes and people online can vote. Now, if you were changing that for a working group, then you shouldn't have advertised it as hybrid and people would come in and vote in the room. It's a working group.
Yeah, everyone back in 10 minutes. I make that 17 past 8 or on my Welcome back. Just to note, Councillor Speed is now in attendance online. We're going to move on to agenda item 6, which is the Local Plan Review Regulation 18 consultation launch. And I'll hand that over to Natalie.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to present the Regulation 18 local plan that is set out in Appendix 1 and the refreshed Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report that is set out in Appendix 3. This is a formal Reg 18 consultation that seeks feedback from stakeholders and the community to a series of questions about the local plan's vision, objectives and development management policies. A Reg 18 local plan is a chance to get early feedback from stakeholders and the community and for them to provide us with information and knowledge that can be fed into the next stage of the local plan. Excuse me. So why is Swale consulting on a Reg 18 local plan now? Fundamentally, because yourselves at PTPWG agreed to it back on the 15th of July, but you did so because since the last local plan Reg 19 consultation in spring 21 and the Reg 18 consultation in autumn of 2021, the National Planning Policy Framework, which is the national guidance from government, was updated in 2024. Also, a number of new evidence-based documents have been undertaken and others have been updated. The Swale Climate and Ecological Emergency Action Plans have been updated. A new Swale Affordable Housing Emergency was declared, and the Town and Country Planning Association Healthy Homes Pledge was signed by the Council. The Council also has a new corporate plan setting out new objectives and priorities. All of these need to be reflected within the local plan, and that has been done within this draft Regulation 18 local plan. It also provides an early opportunity for the public to engage with elements of the local plan. So moving on now to the structure of the draft Regulation 18 local plan that you can see and the policy drafting. So there is flexibility as to what style a local plan Regulation 18 can take. And at PTPWG in July this year, members agreed that the scope of this Regulation 18 would include matters which do not depend on the Highstead Planning Inquiry decision. So the vision, objectives, portrait of the borough and development management policies. So in addition to an introductory section, the opening part of the document is made up of 4 main sections and they each contain consultation questions to help sort of guide the public and stakeholders into what they need to be looking for as they read the document. So the 4 sections are the introduction, which explains what is a local plan and what it can contain, the history of the Swale local plan, because as you are aware, we've done a number of stages, why we're consulting on a Reg 18 now, how people can comment on the consultation, and what happens next. The document then moves on to what has influenced the development of this Reg 18 local plan, including relevant national guidance, any community and stakeholder engagement that's been undertaken, other relevant plans and strategies, and environmental impacts. It then goes on to look at the characteristics of the borough and the key issues and challenges that need to be addressed by the local plan. This then leads up to the vision and objectives for the local plan. So the development management policies are then set out, and these have been grouped thematically into general development criteria, good design, housing, economic development, infrastructure, climate change, pollution and water, biodiversity and landscape, and then the historic environment. There is then a section on implementation and monitoring. This will be more detailed at the Reg 19 stage of the local plan. And finally, there are the appendices, which are the glossary and the list of acronyms of all the many technical phrases and terms that are used within the document, which is often one of the most useful sections of the document because it explains all those horrendous terms that you'll have come across. So just to remind everyone, the vision and objectives are those which were recommended by PTPWG in August 2024 and agreed at Policy and Resources Committee the following month. There are questions in the consultation document asking if the vision is positive, clear, realistic and ambitious, and if the objectives align with the issues and challenges facing Swale that have been set out in the previous section of the plan. You will have noticed that there are no strategic policies sitting above the development management policies within this Reg 18. This was a decision made by members at the PTPWG. These strategic policies typically provide high-level long-term planning principles that guide development and set out these key principles for growth. They will be included at the next stage of the local plan, the Reg 19, but just to be aware, sometimes when you read the DM policies, you think, oh, something's missing, but actually at the next stage, they will be in those high-level strategic policies. So there are 5 new policies within the local plan that members won't have seen in detail before tonight in the climate change chapter. They reflect the ambitions and actions of the Council's adopted climate and ecological emergency. As you'll have heard earlier, we had a separate report on this piece of evidence, which we, as I said, discussed earlier. So Table 1 in Appendix 2 lists all of the policies which have been drafted and which are within the draft Reg 18 local plan, with a commentary column explaining why they've been updated since members saw them last summer. They've been updated either because of new national guidance, new evidence-based documents, and just some needed editing if new documents have come out that were relevant. So the table briefly highlights as well the nature of any change made. So just moving on to the Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report, which is attached to the document at Appendix 3. The Sustainability Appraisal process considers how the local plan will influence the environmental, social and economic characteristics of an area. It's an important part of demonstrating that the local plan is positively prepared and contributes towards sustainable development. It is an iterative process, and this scoping report is an update to the previous scoping report, just to ensure that the baseline data is the most up-to-date possible. As I said, it's the first stage of this sustainability appraisal process and sets out the context and approach for the sustainability appraisal moving forward. A scoping report for this local plan review was undertaken in 2018 when we started the review, but obviously now being 7 years old, we felt it was expedient to refresh it. So that's what we have done. So a lot of it is similar, but just updated facts and figures to make sure it is as relevant as it can be. So just moving back to the local plan, timeline and consultation. So the draft local plan timeline is set out in Appendix 4. It shows the challenging timeline between the Regulation 18, Regulation 19 and submission stages of the local plan, which is required to meet the previously agreed ambition to submit the local plan before the changes are made to the plan making system from January 2027. It's for this reason that we've suggested the Reg 18 consultation will last for 6 weeks. This period is considered appropriate at this stage because of the decision to meet the submission date. Consultation dates have been highlighted to consultees well ahead of schedule, so they have had time to prepare meetings and time to look at all of the documents, and it is a reduced scope of a Reg 18 exercise. There aren't allocations in there, and that is normally what takes people longer to comment on. It is therefore important that we do try and get a recommendation tonight. As you can see, the timetable is tight, and we need to continue to make positive progress for all of the reasons that we've set out in previous papers about the risks of not having an up-to-date local plan and a 5-year housing land supply, as well as members' decision to submit a local plan during the transition window. So we propose the consultation period will run from Monday the 12th of January until Monday the 23rd of February. We are working with the communications team at the Council on a range of engagement opportunities to enable wide-ranging participation in the consultation, including press releases, a second presentation to the local parish council's liaison forum, articles in Inside Swale, Swale's business newsletter, the Green Grid newsletter, social media videos, and frequently asked questions. Any volunteers for the video, obviously, see us afterwards. The consultation questions in the document will be able to be responded to via our online portal objectives. As always, we will take general comments on the document as well. We will notify all our current people on the consultation database ahead of time to give people that notice. All libraries in the borough and council offices will have hard copies of the documents, as well as the Swallows Leisure Centre, because Sittingbourne Library is being shut for an extended period for some refurbishment works. Parish and town councils were made aware of the consultation period at a recent local parish councils liaison forum, so they have had time to plan ahead, hopefully, for the consultation period. After the consultation closes, we will summarise responses, and the main issues will then be reported to a future meeting of this working group, with recommendations on how any issues raised can be addressed in the next stage of the local plan, the Regulation 19. Lastly, typos. Given the sheer breadth and complexity of this document and the timescale the team had to draft them in, it was inevitable that some minor corrections were going to be needed before the consultation starts in 2 months' time. It seemed pragmatic, therefore, for recommendation 2 of the report. So it might be that someone spots a word that should be in the glossary that we've missed, or just grammatical errors. Many of the typos that I suspect you have spotted in your reports may have already been corrected, because since the reports were published, we have been continuing to proofread them. But please do let us know if you have spotted anything by emailing myself over the next couple of days, and we will keep making those corrections before we go to Policy and Resources Committee and then full council in December. We are keeping a detailed table of any typos or minor changes we make, so that there will be that full history. There are also some places you'll have spotted in the plan where it says link to be inserted. This will be done just before the consultation goes live, but part of the council's website is being remodelled, so we just can't put those links in till the last minute because we don't know what they will be. So I mean, it is a working document in terms of some of those bits, but as we get nearer to the consultation date, they will be finalised. And obviously, in response to the large amount of information within the local plan and the agenda tonight, we did arrange for the 2 drop-in sessions, virtual and in person, for members if you wanted to ask questions ahead of tonight, which a couple of members took advantages of. Thank you. And finally, the recommendations therefore tonight are to recommend the local plan Reg 18 document Appendix 1 and the draft Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report update in Appendix 3 to Policy and Resources Committee for recommendation to full council for approval for consultation purposes, and secondly, to recommend that Policy and Resources Committee delegate to the Head of Planning, in consultation to the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group Chair, any minor amendments and corrections to the Local Plan Reg 18 document prior to the start of the consultation period. Thank you, Chair.
Before we go out to questions, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the huge undertaking that this involved. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you. Few comments. First one is 1104 on page 507. This is about rural exception sites, and point 2 is a thorough assessment of potential suitable, available and achievable sites, having regard to potential future strategic policy on development strategy and settlement hierarchy and other relevant policies. My concern here is that rural exception sites want to be the opposite, don't want to be bound by the settlement hierarchy, because the settlement hierarchy already indicates that areas which will get or will receive housing applications more favourably. We need rural exception sites to provide us with housing in places that aren't part of the higher levels of the hierarchy. So I'm just wondering if that we could consider that. My second point is 1204, policy H4, self-build and custom build. I'm not convinced that trying to deliver self-build and custom build as part of larger sites alone is the way to go ahead. We've had more trouble getting them done on larger sites. Could we not have a policy that would enable standalone sites that are just self-build and custom build, so that I think they are what's more favoured in the people who are likely to be buying those houses. My third point is 17, extending the garden of a dwelling in the countryside. This is quite controversial. I don't know what discussions, I can't remember any discussions previously about this, but we were, we've had a pretty standard approach, but we're not keen on it, but it's not a positive thing. And these policies tend, I think, to make it a little easier than perhaps we would have liked in the past. I'd like some sort of comment on that. Next one's a very quick point. It's on the inset on page 538. This is the inset of the urban hierarchy for Sittingbourne. We miss out a huge, great chunk, which is east of the A249. It's not part of the boundary as far as I can work out. And yet that's already been given permission for, I think, 600 houses and has already started to be built. So I was wondering if we could perhaps redraw that line to incorporate the fact that we've already given permission for that to be completely filled with housing. It'd probably be more consistent. Do you want to stop there or shall I carry on?
Natalie, if you want to take those.
Thank you, Chair. And I realised, actually, I forgot to say in my introduction, obviously a lot of the policy drafting work, we did informal workshops with members last summer, going through a lot of the development management policy workshops. And also we've done a lot of work with internal officers at the council in relevant departments and with our development management colleagues on the development management policies. And obviously they're the people that interpret and use the policies daily. So they've been really helpful in sort of making sure they're user-friendly and suitable for planning decisions and appeal. So we must thank them for that as well. I think if I just do the ones on the page 538, Councillor Baldock, they are actually diagrams that have been used from a previous transport model study, so they're not actually our own diagrams, so they are at a point in time. So I think maybe we ought to just put on a year rather than trying to add to the base map.
Okay.
Is that all right? Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Where was that? Sorry, that
fine.
reference?
It was on page 538, Councillor Bonney, of your agenda pack, page 69 of the actual Reg 18, figure 22.0.5.
Sorry, I'm working off the PDF. I'm sorry, I don't have the big agenda pack. I've got the individual local plan, the reduced version.
So it's policy INF 1.
Right. What page on that document?
69 on the printed.
69.
Yeah,
okay,
and it's a figure of the Sittingbourne urban hierarchy. I mean, I would say as well, Councillor Baldock, who does the maps? Ordnance Survey, sorry, do not update their base maps that regularly, actually. So even when we give permission or they're built out, but because, yes, it is from another document, but we will add a year to that so that it is clear. And then I will pass to Stuart to answer your questions on those specific housing policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can take the rural exception policy first. So the purpose of the assessment, referring to the assessment hierarchy, is to ensure that we're still seeking sustainable development. So rural exception gives the opportunity to local communities who can't afford a property in their area to seek sites that they can bring forward. However, the site still needs to be in scale and consideration of the locality that it's in. So it's important that as part of that process, they do look at alternative sites, and which may not be immediately within their village, but in close proximity, and also that they're appropriate to the scale of the assessment that they're near to. So hopefully that answers that question. The second was on the self-build and site-specific sites for self-build. So that's certainly something we can look at as we move forward in terms of selecting sites for the Reg 19. As part of the Emerging HELA process, we have been engaging and asking the questions, what type of development? So we have had some sites back saying that the developers or the site promoters would be interested for self-build only. So it's something we can look at as part of that process. But I think the point of the policy here, the development policy here, is to give that more broad consideration for sites that may come forward as windfall. And then finally, on the garden extensions, there is going to be circumstances where somebody may put forward a garden extension. If it's sensitively located and the impacts are quite minimal, then it's reasonable to consider that approach through policy. Thank you.
Back to you, Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, thank you. I understand fully what he's saying about the rural exceptions. My point is, by having reference to a settlement hierarchy, you are restricting the ability to get, or potentially restricting the ability to get some of these small sites in places that aren't in the settlement hierarchy. And the ones that we've been successful in have been in places like Badlesmere and Staple Street, which are right at the bottom of the settlement hierarchy, probably in the Conference League or whatever it's called these days. So I just don't quite agree that those two words should be in there. The other thing on custom build, some of these that we'd be looking for are really quite, they might be too small for housing allocations, and they are things that Stuart mentioned Windfall. They are things that we would want to be looking at for opportunities over the 20-year period. So I just think some recognition of that as a policy, so that we at least have a policy on it when these come forward over the next 20 years. At the moment, we're kind of limiting ourselves here to self-builds on large developments. So I think maybe we should outline that smaller sites or sites outside of the large ones would be welcome. I can understand the garden one, it's such a finicky one. Yep, that's fine.
Natalie? You got anything on that? Okay. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's only an odd comment, actually. I think I noticed somewhere in the report about water. And this is particularly relevant for all these developments that obviously I know from Sheppey's point of view that the water company, or it may have been the water authority before, but shut all the wells down. So there's none at all. I think there might be one at the prison that they actually pump water. But so all the water is brought from Belmont at Faversham, and the water table under the chalk is actually going down permanently. So this is something that, I think we ought to be looking at potable water. But I know you've done an incredible amount of work, but that was really the main thing. The other thing was the flooding, coastal flooding, and the Environment Agency wanted to abandon all the protection of the sea wall along the Swale south of the island. They wanted to abandon it all and let the land flood. But I pointed out that their 1.4 billion budget would be insufficient to pay the compensation to all the people that would be flooded. So they actually changed their mind on part of it. They did win some of it, but, fair enough. Further on the east end of the island, they allowed it to be flooded. But the rest of it is quite serious. It would have been all Sheerness and all the factories and everything else. So anyway, they changed their mind. So, well, obviously, I should keep a watch on it. But well done for the report, though.
Do you have any other questions? Councillor Bonney.
Cheers, thank you. So there's a couple of things sort of picking up on. So I think one of them I mentioned earlier, which was about solar farms, and we've got in here about agrivoltaics, and it talks about land being used for solar. I have to say, with a certain amount of scepticism, given the amount of solar that seems to be going on BMV land, that whether this has actually covered that off in enough detail, because I think we want to make a very clear policy around the value of our BMV land, and absolutely that should not be used in the circumstances of agrivoltaics. Then we've got, in particular, I looked at, let me just find it, I'm just going to scroll to the paragraph. I think it's 30.0.5, which is, if I get there, let me just get there, scrolling through the document. Hang on a sec.
right, 30.0.5 was one of the references, and it talks about reinforcement of infrastructure. Can I just ask, when an agrivoltaics permission is given, is that run from the date of the grant of the permission, or does it run from the date that they're connected to the grid, the panels?
I'm afraid we don't know. We'll have to find out and come back to you tomorrow, if that's all right, Councillor Bonney.
Yeah. And why I ask is actually quite important, because we know there is an enormous backlog of connections for these. And I'm aware that schemes are on a list for 11 years before they get a connection, and we're handing out so-called temporary permissions. And if we are doing it at the point of connection, effectively we are overriding our temporary permissions. So I would need to be clear in the policy as to what we are actually handing out and at what point. And I think there does need to be clarity around that. Then there is something else which carries on from what Councillor Gould was saying earlier, and this is around health in particular. And I'm acutely focused on this, as I'm sure many of the residents in the borough are, is the position we find ourselves on. And I'll sort of flip back to our corporate plan, where we talk about health on pages 15 and 16. And the admission we got in the public inquiry last week in the Section 106 discussion, when I quizzed their King's Counsel and the officers from the ICB last week, who admitted in the public inquiry they have no plan to improve the GP facilities and no funding to do that. Now, if we are taking forward a local plan, whilst I acknowledge our partners have a tariff rate for charging, the deficits that we face now are only made worse by new development. And what I focused on, particularly last week, was the fact that they may be given a amount of money to develop a facility out, but it's not enough to finish it off. And there may not be enough money in the pot in order to complete it from other SIL money. And then we end up with effectively developments taking place, and this can be anywhere around the borough, where actually they're not coming on stream in a timely fashion. And so I'd like addressed in the local plan a way, a mechanism where that can be addressed, because we cannot go on as we are. And it is 5 parishes evidence, but I'll tell you it tonight because this is a discussion forum and I think it is in the public interest around what our GP numbers are. And this is based off the information that was given in August, published from the NHS, which shows that for every full-time GP, so the working rule generally, that the General Medical Council provide for is 1,800 patients per GP. The national average in England is 2,247. However, when you get to Swale, that is 2,707. And Sheppey is 2,549. Faversham's 2,195. But by far the worst, where the most development has happened over our last local plan, is Sittingbourne. And Sittingbourne has, on average, 3,175 patients per GP. And what we had was the ICB last week admitting they have no plan and no money in order to put that right. And so for every extra development that comes on stream without the requisite GP facilities and local healthcare facilities, it makes that situation even more dire. So I do think we need to address that. And also, if we are looking, so that's whatever the mechanism is, I know there's mention of it in there, and this came out quite clearly, I think, in evidence, is that we do have a Health and Housing Committee. We do have the corporate plan, which talks specifically about health and our partners and how we should work with them. But we need to be really specific in our local plan. And what that means, the bottom line for Sittingbourne, is we effectively need 2 super surgeries. They need to be found. The location of them needs to be found, because what we had last week was, to my mind, totally indefensible from the ICB, that they decided that if the North went ahead, they would put more patients into the memorial. The memorial has no more capacity as far as we can see realistically. It is not connected to public transport, and it doesn't tick those boxes. So this will require us to focus on this and hold them to account and say, where in the local plan do you want to put this, so that we can dedicate the adequate amount of time and resource, and then bid for things as and when necessary in order to put that position right. The other thing is SANGS, Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space. I don't know where it's covered in here. Now, we have a position, I think, with Natural England who say, well, we should take a SAMS payment. And I personally think that making a payment for harm to our highly protected Ramsar to pay for a warden somewhere else doesn't really cut the mustard. And we have had applications where a SANG has been dedicated. We found ourselves in a position where this wasn't adequately documented as a planning condition, but it is, for all intents and purposes, included in the covenant on the land, as SANG. And I do think we need a policy, because what came up, and may come up again if we don't have a policy, is a situation where we're asked to basically override a SANG, which is supposed to be kept in perpetuity, but instead, well, we'll build all over it and we'll take a SAMS payment. And I don't think anyone in their right mind would think that that is a reasonable course of action on a planning permission that's already been granted. So the council does need to think about having a policy there. And then finally, community governance arrangements. So if we do look at strategic sites, I think this council needs to, and we as a committee or working group need to have a discussion of around what we think are suitable governance arrangements if we are to adopt the position of having strategic sites, significant sites. Because I think time and time again, those of us who've ended up with large developments in our ward know the problems around estate management, know the problems around street lighting, parking enforcement, all of those things. And we've kind of left it that they'll be dealt with as a private matter through a management company, which becomes some faceless, bureaucratic corporation that charges the residents a fortune. And they become a headache, not only for the residents, but for us as ward members who have to deal with that. And I think having some proper, robust methodology of what we expect and what we would and wouldn't adopt going forwards, because is it fair and realistic to dump all that on a load of effectively unpaid residents to look after the governance arrangements in a large development, or some, far-flung director who charges the residents a lot of money in service charges. So if those could be addressed, I'd be grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Hand over to Natalie.
Thank you. If we go back to health, so health is covered in the opening sections of this document. On page 19, under the key issues and challenges, it's mentioned under infrastructure. Because health is such a key issue, it would have its own strategic policy in the Reg 19 plan. Obviously then, once that is drafted, some of the development management policies would probably be tweaked so that the policy could cascade down. Sorry, I hate that phrase. Will cascade down into it. So it would be picked up at that stage, but also it would be picked up through the infrastructure delivery plan, because that's where specific proposals could potentially come through. We've got a workshop next Monday that's setting out that, if you wanted to come along to listen to that. But also then once sites are chosen, we would link in any requirements that have arisen to sites that are allocated. Also, as I said earlier, the council have signed the Town and Country Planning Association's Healthy Homes Pledge, which does cover quite a wide range of health. So that's something we've been ensuring that all the policies in the plan are helping to deliver. Many will be delivered through those strategic policies that are still to come. We do consult with the ICB. They will be consulted, obviously, on the Reg 18 in terms of the duty to cooperate meetings. We will be meeting with them as well. They will be consulted on the Reg 18. We are trying, we try proactively to engage with them to find out their latest needs. Obviously, we've got access to their new WYSI's computer assistant, SIDM, thank you, that works out their new requirements, which, as you know, has upped their requirements for new development. So we do try and work closely to them, but those sorts of detail will come in through the Reg 19, the infrastructure delivery plan, and as we move forward. In terms of SANGs, so the SAMS payments are referenced in policy B1, but again, more detail would be added in a general environment strategic policy. The SAMS, Strategic Access Management Mitigation Strategy, the BIRDS as for short, policy, schemes have been brought in all around the country now, but that was brought in to enable developments to pay for, basically it's for mitigation for people, bluntly, walking their dogs along the coast is the biggest disturbance. But so sites within 6 kilometres of the coast do pay a tariff that pays not just for wardening, it's also for educational projects, signage, posts, gates, lots of different activities. But also sites over a certain size, as well as providing the payment, have to provide SANGs or areas on sites. But that isn't all. The plan has to be seen as a whole, holistically. So there are also policies in the plan such as the biodiversity net gain policy, the landscape policies, the open space policies. Those would also provide sites within a development of open space for that sort of recreation and for environmental sites. So it isn't just the SANGs in isolation. I think the one you're talking about, there was I think it's got its own unique challenges, should we call it. But so, as I said, that is within there, but there will be a strategic policy. We'll give it a bit more beef at the next stage. In terms of the community government's idea, yeah, I mean, obviously, if that's something that members are keen on, a brand new policy, I think potentially we would need to bring that in through the Reg 19, because that's something we wouldn't particularly want to rush. It's a new idea. It's not something that any of us have got any experience on, so we would want to take soundings, talk to our colleagues around the county. If that's something that members are keen on, that's something we can take away, but I think it would be most pragmatic for the Reg 19, just rather than rushing it through for the Reg 18.
Councillor Bonney.
Great, yeah, thank you. And I think that helps with some clarifications. I suppose what I'm concerned at is, and as you quite rightly say, it's about, trying to stop the dog walkers, well, they're not the dog walkers, but the dogs chasing the birds, the ground nesting birds, etc. And what is key there is having nearby open green space that people can walk out the front door and go and use it. And I think what we need is is where there are SANGs, what they are, what they're supposed to do, so it's clear to the public what that means in the policy and policy wording, and that they meet the criteria for that, because there is actually some sensible, guidance on what makes a SANG work, and not being right next to a busy road. It's all the things about going for a nice walk, etc. But I think if that's clearly set out, it's much easier when it comes to then, when you've got a policy, to judge whether that is or isn't a suitable SANG space. And as for the ICB, I think if you listen to what was said last Monday morning, I am not filled with confidence that the ICB either have a handle on the dire situation that faces Sittingbourne and also the wider Swale area, or that they have reasonable solutions for the problem, which is why I'm asking that we hold their feet to the fire on this, because their alternative solutions, I think, were quite frankly ridiculous. And when they were asked to defend what they were asking for, they couldn't really. And I found that, as a as a local, knowing the aggro we've all gone through to try and get a GP appointment to see, healthcare professionals, they're the gatekeepers to the wider NHS. I just found it horrifying, and we need to drag them firmly into providing some solutions. And I don't want to leave it so late in our process that, I hear what you say about 19, but what work can we do in between that we can really hold them to account on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I understand that, Councillor Bonnet, and we, as I said, we have started. And the other advantage of a Reg 18 consultation is we will get other people's views on health, the general public, other expertise and stakeholders, which will then give us more oomph when we're talking to the health professionals. But yes, no, we are pushing politely.
It's the commissioners, I think, we have
Yes,
the problem
well,
with, not the
yes.
health professionals.
I know, yes. The people we need. And just in terms of SANGs, one of the things Birdwise do spend the tariff on is signage on SANGs to assist people, because obviously the people that use them bluntly won't read the local plan and the bits in it. So it's actually, they do signage on sites, letting people know what to use, why, and that's a lot of their education programme as well. Thank you.
Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up, because I think what's just been said about the ICB, and I think is extraordinarily important. And I think it is right that we have a really robust strategy. I understand the strategic policies will come out in the Reg 19, but we've got some time between now and then as a working group to come up with what that strategic policy, if there's any changes to existing ones, needs to look like before the Reg 19 comes out. And we've got time to do that as a working group. I'd expand that also to education. If you ask the people on the east of the Isle of Sheppey where they're going to go to school next year, they don't know. They could be Maidstone, could be Sheppey if they're lucky. Because again, no one's holding KCC's foot or the government's feet to the fire on that. So I think it would be equally important to have a really robust strategic policy on education to sit alongside the health issue. I'm going to go back to climate change now. On page 550 under the C1 preamble, the policy C1 and all the preamble there, it talks about under paragraph 26.015, before adoption of this policy. So it recognises in the texts that the policies haven't been adopted, which is what I was arguing earlier. They're not policies of the council yet because they haven't been adopted. We also talk earlier on in the document under INF1, policy INF1 22, when we're talking about things like the LC whip and the Kent transport policies for cycling and walking, we talk there about, we make reference to them and say that they will become material once they've been approved and agreed. So I think policies C1 and C5 kind of fall into that camp. We accept that they're not policies that have been adopted yet under paragraph 26015, and we need to adopt them. And I think it's not clear in the document, it's very clear earlier on in the document about the infrastructure, about the policies for walking and cycling, that they're in draft, they're being discussed, but they will form part of the evidence moving forward. I think we need the same clarification about C1 to C5. Either in the document, I don't want this document to go forward without C1 and C5 in it, but they're draft policies at the moment. They've not been adopted because it says they haven't. I'm not aware of a timetable to get them adopted, and it would be quite good to see that timetable, because I'm not saying they shouldn't be. Whether they're the right policies or not, I don't know, because we've not had that report. But if we're looking to build, or we strip them out entirely, Chair, and we make them strategic policies. If we think climate change and meeting a net zero target by 2045, whenever it is a strategically important thing for this council, like it's strategically important that we don't develop beyond the width of the capability of the health service or the education service to deliver for the residents of the houses that we allow to be built. If we think all that is so important, and we think climate change issues are that important, then why don't we make that a strategic policy under Reg 19 and give us time to work the policy through, so it sits there not in draft, but as a strategic, high level, extraordinarily important policy that we've all had a chance then to develop in the way that we would hope to do. Because it's very clear, looking at the Appendix 2 table, that every policy here, including the ones that have been discussed tonight, our policies, and Councillor Baldock raised a couple, they are existing adopted policies with amendments to make changes to reflect changes in the material evidence that's there or in government policy. And we accept that, and that's what happens. And part of the Reg 18 process is to actually draw that out and say, actually, do you think they can be made even better? Which is great. C1 to C5 are new. And I do not think that we should be putting them in the Reg 18. I think we should leave them into the Reg 19 and strategic policies and work them through in the way that we develop all policies. And if the committee is not happy to recommend that to P&R, then I would certainly hope that we change the wording and the references within the Reg 18 document to reflect what it says under 26015, that these aren't policies of the council, that they've not been adopted.
Natalie?
So there's kind of two recommendations in there, Chair, and I'm happy to go with either.
Thank you, Chair. So all policies within this Reg 18 document are draft, as Joanne said earlier, until the local plan is adopted after the examination in public. So none of these policies are anything but draft until adoption of the local plan in 2027. So none of them that are in this are previously adopted policies. Some were in the previous draft, 2 draft Reg 18s, 1 draft Reg 19. Those were not adopted policies of the council either. They were draft policies which are in earlier iterations of this local plan review. So no policy in a local plan is adopted until it is in an adopted local plan at the end of the process. So none of these policies are adopted. We can make the document clearer to make that clear to people, but none of these are adopted policies of the council until the plan is adopted in the future.
Thank you. A quick question, if I may, Chair. So none of these policies appear in Bearing Fruits? They are all completely new from Bearing Fruits, so there's no policy on any of this in Bearing Fruits, and these are updates of those existing policies that were agreed in 2017?
There will be many on similar topics, because planning does change quite a lot regularly, but the topics are the same. So yes, some of the wording might be slightly similar, but no, none of them are identical, and they will have been updated drastically since the adopted plan because national policy has changed, evidence base has changed. We've worked with your members through committees, but no, they're not adopted policies. As I said, the topics and general themes and direction of travel, quite a few, yes, might be quite similar because that is the nature of them. You know, things of historic buildings, not a lot often changes, should we say, you know, and the policy is the same. So yes, no, they are not from the adopted local plan. They are from previous iterations of this local plan review, of which admittedly there have been quite a few iterations.
Anything to add, Councillor Whiting?
It's the word new that gets me, that we haven't had a chance to discuss in full before they're out there in the public eye, that's all. And I won't keep labouring the point now, I've made it. I think that if you look at historic building thing, the various policies we have about building control and all the other bits and pieces that sit there are very old policies, and we update them with legislation. It's in our constitution to allow officers to do that. These are brand new policies that we're introducing, and I think therefore they are different than new iterations of existing older policies that have been rewritten many times, but have been on the books, as it were, for a very long time. Because Bearing Fruits is full of a lot of these, but they just look slightly different. And yeah, I take the point they've been updated enormously, but they're not new. Most of them are not new. Building out into the countryside from your garden isn't a new policy, we've just updated it slightly. And I understand all that. So that I'll leave it at that. I feel like I'm talking to myself here, so I'll stop.
Councillor Harrison.
I'll get where you're coming from. Thanks, Chair. On health, I think that when you do look at this as a PTPWG, I think that you should be not vague, we need adequate health, but specific. We need adequate health, and I'm making this up, by the way, because I'm within a 3 mile radius or a 2.576 radius of settlements, or I think you've got to be quite specific like that, because what we found out with when I was a cabinet member, I think they were the K&M CCG at the time. They changed, same people, different names. They did a review of estates, and I'm making this number up because I can't remember. In Swale, you have a need for, let's say, 2,500 square feet of space for your needs. Oh gosh, you've got 3,000. You've got 3,000 square feet altogether in Swale. So no, you ain't getting another GP surgery over there or there. The fact that 3,000 square feet is quite centralised, say in the memorial, plus the bit behind it, whoever his name is. That's him, yeah. We're not, GP surgeries, neighbourhood health is not about centralising everything. It's about having it where the need is. If you need to go to an acute hospital, you don't need it, well, you don't need it, I'm sure they would love it down the road, but you go to a central point because you need the economies of scale. But local health needs are not the same. And what I'm saying is that when you do discuss it, I think you're going to have to be looking at stuff like this. Number one, to be fair, there aren't enough GPs, but a number of surgeries are looking at training up healthcare assistants, and having a whole range of different health professionals that aren't GPs, which is great. There's no space to put them. And there are some surgeries that would offer more facilities to you and me, except that they have not even got a room. They're using, some of them actually cleared out a broom cupboard for some, and fit a desk and a chair in, or 2 chairs. That's how bad it is. But overall, the square footage is more than enough for your needs. So it's understanding how they work it out. The ICB has to, so you need 2.5, you've got 3. So the ICB is actually paying for that 500 square foot of space that ain't actually being used. So if you've got anything else, we're going to shove it into that 500. The NHS property, which is a limited company, wholly owned by the government, to be fair, but they are a company. They're running a business, and they whack the prices up as and when they feel like it. Service charges go through the roof. We have got to the stage where there's one, okay, it's not in Swale, but it could be, couldn't it? There's a healthy living centre down the road, built around a GP practice, where you have whacked my prices up so much, my service charges up so much, I want to move out. I'm actively looking to move out of that purpose-built thing, which was for the residents. You're not doing anyone any favours, but the ICB will then be paying for that empty space. So the more you understand how this huge monolithic organisation has worked, the more you want to pull your hair out, to be fair. But it's actually saying, well, okay, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And by God, we've done a lot of that over the years at Swale. So come on, when you have your PT, whatever it is, meetings, actually give a lot of thought to how you can get round. I'm just thinking this has been recorded, isn't it? How you can, manage the situation to the best advantage of the Swale residents. How's that? But if you go and say, well, we need more, no, tough, base, that's what you get. So you've got to go another route. If you can't go through, you've got to go round. But you've got to be quite specific about what you need. And it is the space, because they will, we can't get GPs, so why do you want more space? But as I say, I know a lot of the practices are doing quite an awful lot of different areas of work, and okay, we'll have a physio in one day a week to take the people in Sittingbourne who need physio because we've got a spare room. Well, we can't have a physio in one day a week on the island because we ain't got a spare room, that sort of thing. So it's understanding what there is and then how you get around it. And what I will say is, because I was on the planning committee at the time, the Meads took 19 years. I was here when we agreed to that original planning permission. And I was here every other month when the officers said, yeah, we've been in touch with the NHS. They say they don't need that site. They don't need that site. They don't need that site. And some years later, and several chief execs later, when Roger and I met with the CEO, well, yeah, there's a real need over there on the Meads, but we can't afford to build the land to build one, to buy the land to build one. And Roger and I said, isn't it a good thing that we never let the developer carry on and build more houses on that bit of space we've been saving for you? 19 years that took. It's got to hold the faith. I've been here too long, and I. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Not quite long enough, Councillor Harrison. A few more years, please. So first and foremost, I think I am content with what we have here for Reg 18. I think it is right that we take the ideas that have been crafted over, at this point, 6, 7, 8 years to the public for their opinions. If we're going to develop policy further down the road around governance, adoption, management companies, whatever you want to call it, I think a key element that needs to be looked at is contract lengths. So what you tend to find with management companies, they get a contract for somewhere between 3 and 5 years. That disincentivises them from actually conducting proper management. Think about it. If you're in year 4 of a contract, are you really going to replace that tree that's just died? Or are you going to try and leave it for the next contractor? If you look at longer contracts, which is what the industry or the well-behaved part of the industry have been asking for, you encourage land stewardship. You encourage the ability to recruit apprentices to learn the trade and then actually manage that ongoing. Also looking at whether or not the future parish councils, whatever they may look like after a CGR and LGR, take on going forward. Yes, I understand that we've got the C1 to C5s fairly recently. we haven't seen them in huge amounts. By the same token, go back to 2017, there were items that were shoved in at the last minute to get the bearing fruits across the line during the post-inspection. So yeah, we can't say there isn't precedent on having to have things that come fairly late on in order to get a local plan to the point where it can be adopted. I think we have spent many, many years debating, delaying, dithering and kicking cans down the road to the detriment of our residents, to the point where, let's face it, we've probably got bills longer than all of our combined arms for planning appeals and planning hearings that could have probably been avoided if we'd got a local plan adopted in a fairly reasonable time frame. Now's not the time to delay further. Now is the time to put this out to Reg 18, continue the development of strategic policies and additional policies for the Reg 19, and get this thing moving and over the line.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you. I think on the policies C1 to C5, there was a section in Bearing Fruits about renewable energy and infrastructure. It was very thin, and I think it's an area where things have moved on enormously in 9 years, or 8 years, or whatever it is, since 2017, and so I think a complete rewrite of that section is perfectly appropriate at this section at this point, and I think we have the evidence to which is in line with our adopted climate emergency declaration and the corporate plan and the Climate Change Act and the NPPF, that this is the direction that we need to go. So I think a full rewrite is very appropriate at this point, and now we're putting it out for consultation. But this is what we would like to see in it, given our climate change declaration, which I think was unanimous at the time. It involves doing this sort of thing. So I'm absolutely in favour of this going forward, as is at this point. And I think there are other things in here as well. Councillor McDonald was mentioning about the water. We've got a section in here in policy C10 about major development intending to connect to mains drainage and wastewater systems must demonstrate that the infrastructure in place before construction begins. That's a really important policy, because it's not so much use afterwards, especially when infrastructure is at capacity. And we have tankers lined up down Bourton, on the slip road to Bourton at the moment. So many tankers lined up to take the stuff away that they have to put traffic lights in. It's 15 I counted when I was passing there this morning. And so, if that infrastructure isn't in place, that sort of thing is going to happen. So I'm pleased that that's a new, that's in there as a policy. And I'm sure there are many other tweaks, improvements that, if there weren't tweaks and improvements, what have we been doing going out for this? So I think this should reflect the best possible outcomes that we can get for our residents, and I'm very pleased that the C1 to C5 are in there as they are. Thank you.
Councillor Bonney.
Cheers, thank you. So I'm going briefly back to health. It is just, if we could at least put some signposting in there for residents on the health thing, that something else would be coming forward, or putting an explanation in there. And then the other thing, which caused an awful lot of discussion, and when you hear two King's councils debating where a comma should be on affordable housing, and it went on for hours, your policy is not right. I was just looking at affordable housing, and we talk about greenfield. It's not defined, greenfield, in the document. I've just done a search and destroy on the word greenfield. So I think it probably does need to have a definition. Otherwise, we're going to have King's Council
debating for hours what a greenfield is. And to the extent that there might be something small on the site, but, you know, if we could address that, because I think these things need to be tightened up so that everyone knows where they stand.
Natalie, if you'd like to take that.
Yeah, so just in terms of debates on commas, that's part of the thing that our colleagues in development management, that's why we consulted them, because as we said, they have to sit through appeals quite regularly, and that's some of the comments they did helpfully come back with. I think we have now added brownfield and greenfield land into the glossary. I have seen emails the last week, but I will double check. But if you spot anything else, do keep letting us know, because we are adding. And just, I suddenly thought back onto your governance policy, the Town and Country Planning Association lead on things like that, partly because it links to their garden communities work, but they have a lot of information on that. So we will look to them sort of for inspiration and ideas, really. And obviously we can talk to colleagues at Ebbsfleet Corporation, because that's something they do lead on. We've got good links with them, so we will start looking into that. Actually, I think our two planners that are doing, just started their masters probably, I won't look at them, have got topics on that as well, so it might nicely link in with some of their research.
So to help you there, because I think what we faced was, you know, something going into Section 106, which was, well, it was completely rudimentary. It wasn't even basic. But, you know, there are different models, land trusts and all those sorts of things. But I think there needs to be a look around carefully at what has gone before and what has worked and not worked, because there'll be places where they'll say, oh, we've got this marvellous model. Well, A, have you built out? And have you actually delivered? Because a lot of it hasn't been enacted or properly, and a lot of it relies on parish councils, and I think it's deeply unfair that parish councils get saddled quite often. And the one, what was the old airfield near Westmoreland, that one, Kings Hill. So the parish council there ended up with quite a lot of assets. You know, there needs to be a clear route, I think. If you're planning these things, this is about good planning, and it's having that clear route of who's responsible for what. And if you're asking a whole bunch of unpaid people and it's not their professional area to do this stuff, I just think it's doomed to failure, quite frankly. And they've got to be capitalised. And this is really important, because this goes back to viability that we were just discussing, because I hear what you say, oh, well, we'll turf out some of the land in these strategic developments. But we know vast tracts of the borough are the Kent Downs. They also have the setting of the Kent Downs, which will require significantly higher landscaping qualities, wherever they are, whether it's Sittingbourne End or Faversham End, etc. If they're near Ramsar sites, etc., they will need higher ecological. But they'll also need, we know, large tracts of our area have got, and I'm really pleased to see the archaeology wording in there, but we know that requires significant cost input. So these so-called abnormals, and including community governance on a large strategic site, needs capitalising at the outset. You can't have open spaces with no money in there to maintain them from day one. They've got to start with a capital sum, and that means that when you look at those things, that's got to be factored in. So I know we said that would come along in the Reg 19, but we will be looking at sites, and then there'll be the viability bit. I suppose my concern is, and then obviously the actual Reg 19 document is, it's chicken and an egg, which comes first, because can you choose the sites without understanding the viability and vice versa? So, and we don't want it to be all rushed at the lastminute.com, but we know we're tight on time. But I suppose it's for us as a working group to understand that, so we can work with it.
Natalie. And just so I've thought one other thing, and then I will shut up, sorry. A report that I know we brought to members probably about 8 years ago now, did have a large section on stewardship and all the different types of models by, I know it wasn't liked by everyone, the Peter Brett report. So I'll find that out and send the link round, because they did a lot of research on the different stewardship models, as you say, the different ones, so we can see if there's anything useful in there.
Councillor Whiting.
On that last point, perhaps that, I mean, it'd be very, I've dealt with so many problems where you've got the road is owned by KCC, then there's a grass verge that Thwaill own, then there's a pavement that KCC own, and then there's another piece of shrubbery that's owned by the management company. And when it all gets untidy, everybody says, it's not me, Gov, holds their hands up. And it's left untidy, nobody clears the rubbish up because it's not on public land, it's on the bit that's owned by the management company, and it's all a complete nonsense. So anything we can do to design that out at the point at which we give somebody a planning permission and say, you are going to get this sorted in such a way that, as Councillor Bonney has described, I think is a good thing. So perhaps that Brett report could come as an agenda item to this working group, rather than just circulate it and send it to members and say, read this. You know, come with some recommendations about how we might formulate that policy and move it forward, so that we've got that input from the start. What the options are, what options may be open to us as a council, as a planning authority.
Do we currently have space available for that?
It's not scheduled at the moment. I mean, I will have a look at it. It's on our website under the evidence-based section. I'll just have to have a look to see if it's still relevant, because it's, you know, it is reasonably old. But I just meant it, you know, if you wanted to go away and have a look at it yourselves ahead of it, it would just be another bit of useful information for people to have a look at first.
But as a future item, I think, Chair, for this committee, it would be quite Councillor Bonney's raised it. I think it's a very good conversation to be had, and that we should move forward with about how we do build this into to our planning regime moving forward.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say something positive. I mean, what a rich and varied borough we live in. I mean, you don't think about it. You live here, you get on and do with it. So I think it was possibly Councillor Gould's idea initially to have a more limited Reg 18. Am I right? I think it was. But I think it's worked really well, because we can look at this without getting distracted by the numbers. Could I ask in the future, I don't know how other people feel, for those that have a paper copy of reports, even if we could get things in bits and bobs, I would be quite happy to know that this I can pick up tomorrow is for the meeting in 3 weeks' time, to give us chance to read it and do the report's credit. Thank you.
Yeah, we will try. I mean, obviously it was a mammoth task to get this written in the time, and then obviously with the printer breaking down, didn't help. But yeah, we will endeavour to do that.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Bonney?
Yeah, when we go to consult, it's obviously 6 weeks, and it's going to be a couple hundred pages, the document, isn't it? And I know we don't normally print, but what are we going to do to make sure that it's widely available and easy for people to access who aren't online?
Yep, so as I said earlier, there'll be printed copies on all the libraries and in the council offices, also at the Swallows Leisure Centre, because the Sittingbourne Libraries is being remodelled to take the births, deaths and marriages centre for part of that, so it will be in there. And we're working with the comms team at the minute to, for a wider comms programme. We're doing videos on social media. We're doing frequently asked questions of the actual document, and for members, because that was requested some time back.
Is that in the reception downstairs that document will be?
It will be, but that's why we've also got the Swallows, because obviously we're not open that often here.
No.
So that's why the Swallows is open, obviously, 7 days a week.
And that'll be in the reception of the Swallows, will it?
Yes, hopefully, yeah. and inside swale articles, as I said, all of that. We've already provided text to all the parish and town councils so it can go in their magazines. So Faversham Town Council are putting it in their magazine that comes out in January, that goes to every house in the Faversham area. So we're sort of trying as wide as possible. And we're always available on the phone if people want to ring up and discuss it, or meet in reception. So,
Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, without creating work, is it possible to have a hard copy at the various parish offices, particularly the larger parishes and town councils? Thank you.
we currently don't have that budgeted for. I mean, if that's something that members wanted to vote on today, to agree.
I mean, we've got 37 parishes, 200 pages each. That's papers, what, £5 for a ream, so it's about £2.50 a copy.
Oh, no, it's not.
Sorry?
It's not.
Oh, there's all the ink, yeah. I'm just trying to add it up in my head as we go along, do the sums. It does come to quite a lot of money.
It's normally about £45 a copy for the local plan, yeah.
So 35 times 40, that's a lot. That's 1,500 quid, isn't it, by my reckoning?
If you've got any budget left from your member grant, Peter, feel free to donate it.
Seems too much to me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think there'd be the votes in the room. Anything else that anyone's got?
So on that, if it is about £45 a copy, I mean, well, can we get our printers to give us a price? But if a parish council does want a paper copy and wants to purchase it, can they?
Yeah.
So rather than paying the standard rate of per page, you know, printing, can we have a document price for it?
Yes, I'm just thinking
Or do you want to think about that and come back with an answer?
There are published fees and charges for printing, and I don't know what.
But this is a document rather
them,
than.
But it would feel eminently sensible. So leave it with me. Please.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And they could put a pre-order in, couldn't they? So you know how many you're going to print effectively.
Like an Amazon bestseller.
Yeah, exactly. Whoa, there you go, look.
All signed copies. You can all sign them.
Well, actually,
you could.
Councillor MacDonald.
If parishes are willing, £45, you know, I mean, I know the two parishes, Minster Parish and Sheerness Town, would put to enable the populace to be able to access it, quite frankly, and £45 is only a small amount out of their total assets. Thank you.
Right, does everyone understand the two recommendations as set out in the report? In which case we'll move straight to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, yeah, that's true. I'll propose it. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Gould. All those in favour? You in favour, Councillor Bonney?
It's a working group.
Yeah, but come on. It says it. Look. It says in here. I've got to ask. So anyway, that's agreed. So I make that 25 to 10, and that's the meeting closed.